And now I want to introduce our speaker today. It's Dan Sachs from California. We're really pleased to have him. He's a fellow member of the San Francisco Postcard Show, as well as the San Jose Postcard Club. I said show. Both of them clubs and prominent and a lot of fun and a long history in our collecting hobby. But Dan's here to talk about his topic, and I think I'm just going to turn it over to Dan and thank you for being here, Mr. Sachs.
Okay, thank you, Hal. All right, The Terrors of the Tiny Tads, postcards of Gustav Verbeck. And this is Gustav, and very little information is available about him on the internet for someone who was a 20th century artist. I do know that his Wikipedia listing says he was of Dutch ancestry. His parents were Reformed Church of America missionaries working in Japan when he was born in Nagasaki in 1867. So he grows up in Japan, and at some point he moves to Paris to study art, and he also is an illustrator for several newspapers and magazines there. And in 1900, he moves to the United States, where he continues as a illustrator for magazines. And in 1903, he creates his most, well, I guess the comic strip he's best known for, The Upside Downs of Little Lady Lovekins and Old Man Muffaroo. And so you would start off reading it as a normal comic strip, starting in the upper left-hand corner, reading across that line, then the three frames on the bottom. And I want you to pay attention, to this frame here. You see, that could be Old Man Muffaroo in a canoe with a fish next to an island with two trees. But what you would then do is turn the newspaper upside down and continue reading it. And now the trees and the island and the canoe and the man have turned into a giant bird. But this comic strip only lasted for 2 years. And then his longest running comic strip was The Terrors of the Tiny Tads. This started in 1905. The strip features a group of 4 boys known as the Tads who encounter these strange animals that have been combined with inanimate objects to form new, sometimes menacing creatures. What we see here is, this is May 28th, 1905 strip, the hippopotamobile and the umbrella-font. And I suppose the terrors is that some of these animals are a bit terrifying, but as you can see, everything works out in the end. The elephant is keeping the Tads dry. And after ending the Tiny Tads comic strip around 1914, Verbeck becomes a painter and sculptor, and he dies in 1937. So at the same time as these comic strips were running, there are also advertising postcards that were issued mostly for children's clothing and shoe stores. This is the first card I have. I'm just going to run through these chronologically. It shows Betty, who is looking very alluring in this particular card. She's toned down in later cards, and they're always engaged in activities that have something to do with the month or the season. And there's always a little poem, as you can see in the upper left-hand corner. Betty looks so nice and trim, seated by the river brim. Bruin thinks it's up to him just to teach her how to swim. And this is the only card that I've seen that has the little word balloon from the bear. And there's always, at least for the advertising cards, I have seen some of these cards without the advertising, and how that got in, how those got into circulation is a mystery. But there's always a little script in the lower right-hand corner for the store. This is Alfred Cross and Company in Lynn, Massachusetts. And here's the backside of the card. And all of these cards, which were issued from 1907 and 1914, use the same undivided back, which of course was no longer required in 1907. So that's a mystery. And the cards, most of the cards say copyright Tiny Tad's Company, and some have a Tiny Tad's trademark. So here's one, September 1907, from the Collins Cash Clothing Company in Fort Collins, Colorado. And you can see it's September, so kids are going back to school, except for the one Tad who's wearing the dunce cap. And someone has taken this card and written a personal message on it, and it was mailed to a friend. Here's November 1907 from Lennon's Busy Shoe Apartment in St. Paul, Minnesota. Let me go back. Most of the cards, well, all the cards show two Tads, usually Betty, the bear, and the crow, but not always. Like in this card, there's no crow. It's been replaced by a turkey in the tree for Thanksgiving. And this card on the left margin says, this is the first of a series of Tiny Tad's postcards. The others will be sent from month to month until a complete set of 12 has been issued. And you can see the Tiny Tad's trademark in the upper right-hand corner. And it's common for the promotional text to mention the good value offered at that particular business. As you can see in the bottom line, comfort, style, and availability at the price you like to pay. Now here's February ice fishing for Brennig and Broman in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And you can see Washington's birthday is highlighted in red on the February 22nd. That's it. You are fishing for your favor. You want the greatest possible value for the money you spend. March 1908 from the Red Front in Bellingham, Washington. Once again, the crow is missing, but we have the giant butterfly one of the Tads is trying to catch. And as the buds are sprouting on the trees, the grass is growing green, the tiny Tads are glad because a butterfly is seen. Gustav was quite the poem. I assume Gustav wrote these poems. Here is April 1908, an apparel store, Algar. It's not posted, so I have no idea where it was. 1310 Atlantic Avenue. I only know there's an Atlantic Avenue on Monopoly, but it could be Atlantic City, could be New York, could be another town. As you can see, April showers are good for flowers, but not so good for Bet, and very bad for naughty Tad, whose feet are getting wet. And then, of course, there's the nice big frog in the foreground. And May 1908, also from Algar. Now we've added Tiny Tad says, best values in town. And May is the month when we dig and we hoe, and we all try to help the poor flowers to grow. And even the bear is helping to plant flowers. Now, this was the month, May 1908, Tiny Tad's card, where I learned that while there are 12 months in a year, there isn't necessarily just 12 cards when collecting the Tiny Tads. Here's 3 versions of the same card, but for different stores. The one in the upper left-hand corner is J. Waterman Company, mailed from Bangor to Waterville, Maine. Then Joseph Myers and Sons in Salem, Oregon. Those 2 cards have the same message as the previous card. But the third card in the lower right-hand corner is W&D, I think it's Denew Company in Toronto, Canada. And its message includes, won't you please tell Daddy to get a new hat? Here's June 1908 from Miggs and Company in Bridgeport, Connecticut, outfitters to men, women, and children. And this also has, Tiny Tad says, summer garb that combines style and comfort. The June day's a scorcher, it sizzles and glows. The sun sheds his rays while we shed our clothes. Except for Betty, she's demure. Here's July 1908 with July 4th highlighted in red from the Gary Clothing Company in Kansas City, Missouri. Enough variety to meet every taste. July is the month for vacation and rest and for rides on the lake with the girl you love best. August 1908 from Bailey's, the big store in Cleveland, Ohio. And Tiny Tad stopped saying anything here in August and for the rest of these cards. And I do like in August when it's hot, I wish sometimes I was a little fish. Here's September 1908, going back to school for the Crane Marks Company in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And as you can see, once again, one Tad does not want to go to school. In October 1908, it's kind of with a Halloween motif. And for the Emporium here in San Francisco. Now, my Tiny Tads collection began when I was given a group of these Emporium cards. The cards were all mailed to the younger brother of a family friend, and the person who inherited the friend's estate, knowing I was a postcard collector, gave me the cards. And of course, then I started looking for more. And also on this card, you can see that the bear now has a new name, Teddy Bear, which of course has the Theodore Roosevelt connection. And most of the copy on the Emporium cards are also in rhyme. So there's 2 poems on each card. And these Emporium cards, the text is much easier to read too. And this was the Emporium in downtown San Francisco. It was a huge department store on Market Street. Here's another view of it. You can see it on the right side. Those are some of the older skyscrapers on Market Street that came down in the earthquake. And here's the backside of those Emporium cards. You can see they're using like an addressograph machine to mail these cards to Mr. Eugene Way in Roseville, California, which is outside of Sacramento. And I was able to locate Eugene's grave. Here's the information. So he would have been about 6 years old when he was getting these cards. So I assume a parent came down to San Francisco, signed him up at the Emporium, and for the next year, Eugene got one of these cards every month. Here's the November 8th, 1908 card, which is football season. Hooray, hooray, an autumn day, and Teddy Bear will join the play. And you see, the Emporium was so well known in San Francisco, it doesn't have to give its address, although the script does mention they're located on Market Street. Here's their December card. Betty and the Crow are taking a little Christmas vacation, but Santa and the reindeer are there with the bear. And it says, the Tads do think our store is grand, that not another in the land is quite so full of dandy toys for all you little girls and boys. And here's January 1909. You can see Old Man 1908 is on the way out, and Baby 1909 is arriving. The bear's fur is now white, and the crow still isn't around. She's gone south for the winter, I suppose. February 1909, and Betty has a new outfit for Valentine's Day. Don't you think it would be fine if I could be your Valentine? I think Teddy's a little sweet on Betty. Here's March 1909, and perfect time for flying a kite. We like the March winds that bluster and storm and blow up the fires that keep us all warm. In April 1909, that's when baseball starts. The robins sing, the blackbirds call, on every side is heard, play ball. I like this one. When the Tads and Bet go shopping, they stay the entire day. They shop at the Emporium and lunch in the big cafe. Here's May 1909. Teddy bear up in the tree, pick some flowers, please, for me. And once again, the Tads and Bet have traveled this wide world o'er and o'er, but find no place they like as well as California's grandest store. Now, this is June 1909. This card and the next 4 cards use the same image as that same month in 1908. But now they've added the phases of the moon to the calendar. And of course, the ad copy is different for the Emporium, but it's getting easier to read. The print is much easier to read. So this is the same image as 1908. Same for August. But the text here for August, San Francisco is donning a gorgeous array in event of the coming of Portola Day. The Emporium extends a welcoming hand to all of the comers from o'er the whole land. Portola Day was a celebration held in San Francisco in 1909, celebrating the Portola expedition of 1769, where Gaspar de Portola and his group of men reached what is now the city of Pacifica, south of San Francisco, and some of his scouts climbed the mountain range to the east, and on November 1st, became the first Europeans to see San Francisco Bay. And back in 1909, that was a little 4-day event. As September 1909, using the same image as 1908. But of course, advertising that you should go to the Emporium to get new clothes and books for the new fall term. Here's June 1910 for Koenig's Kearny and Post Street in San Francisco. The script mentions it as a shoe store, and this is the first calendar card I have that uses a creature similar to what we saw in the comic strips. This is the giraffe. Belay abaft, a jolly craft, with scuppers hard a lee. The tinies call her a giraffe. She looks like one begee. And everyone's there. Betty's got a telescope, the Tads, the bear is fishing, and the crow is up on top of the sail. And here's December 1910 for H.M.&R Shoe Company in Toledo, Ohio. You see Santa and the sled up in the upper right-hand corner. And on the tree are pelicandles, pelicans with candles on their heads. Old Santy and the Tads tonight have fixed a tree for Bet, with pelicandles shining bright on presents she will get. And the images of the next 6 cards were provided to me by a fellow San Francisco Club member, Chuck Bannock. And you can see a very different style. Now we're going vertical. May 1912. This is the Umpty Doodle with just a single Tad. Betty and the bear and the other Tad are gone. And this is for I. Magnin and Company, which, it's no longer in business, but when it was in business, I. Magnin was a very high-end department store. Okay, get your summer clothes now and tell mother you want her to buy them at Magnin's, who have the largest assortment, the smartest styles, and the best values in attire for girls. Here's January 1913. This is the Elephantasy in a single Tad for carpets and rugs of Campbell and Campbell, their furniture people in Brandon, Manitoba. In March 1913, the Hala Butterfly with all 4 Tads now for C.H. Baker in San Francisco. And I like where it says, don't forget our playroom. It is for your use. And this is also mentioned on all the C.H. Baker cards. A little telling the kids to come down and use their playroom. And it looks like the Tads are dropping money from the basket under the Halla butterfly. Aboard the Halla butterfly, the tiny tads are whizzing by, while folks below look up and wish they had that butterflying fish. Here's the umbrella font that we saw in the Tiny Tads comic strip. And once again, he's protecting the four Tads from the rain. And once again, C.H. Baker, the P.S., don't forget the playroom. Here's the pretty hippopotamus. This is hard for me to read. Hippopotamustache. That's it, hippopotamustache. You ain't got no care. You don't have to worry about the kinds of things you wear. And this also says, don't forget our playroom. It is for you to enjoy. So you can imagine a child getting this card, imploring his or her mother to take them to C.H. Baker. Now, this is July 19th, 1913. The Taddies ask the Ding-a-do what he is looking at below. Some wondrous chances, answers he, to buy good things reasonably. I had to figure this one out. So it's a dingo who's making much ado about what he sees down below. And I like this message. Firecrackers don't last, good shoes do. Now, there's no calendar on this card with the Pelicanon from C.H. Baker, but it is postmarked September 1913. And as you can see, the cancellation is promoting the 1915 Panama Pacific Exposition that was held in San Francisco to celebrate the opening of the Panama Canal and the recovery of San Francisco after the 1906 earthquake. And because I lived in San Francisco for many years, I can report that Dora lived near Bernal Heights on the southern edge of the city. Now, the following cards are all from the same clothing store in Rochester, New York, McCurdy and Norwell, which later became McCurdy and Robinson. In October 1913, this is the Unicorn Popper, and the text is to encourage children to get their mother to bring them to the store to play when she comes downtown. This is the, from November 1913, the silly old pheasantalope, which is, I assume, was an ancestor of the jackalope that we see on later cards. And you can see there's three Tads on this card, two under the tree and one shooting at the pheasantalope, but he will not be harmed, I hope. Now, I like this poem. It's long, from November 1913. A Kodachshund espies a Tad. A film comes o'er his eyes, and on this film he snaps him while he stands in mute surprise. Then out of pure focusedness he comes a trifle near, and snaps again so viciously that Tad departs in fear. I think this is a really clever creature. And now, January 1914, everyone's back. Two Tads, Betty, Teddy, and the Crow reappear on a new image for January for McCurdy and Norwell. Happy New Year, everyone. Hope that this one just begun will bring a lot of health and fun and piles of money ere it's done. Now, in the following cards from 1914, once again, use images from 1908 and 1909. But of course, there's a different ad copy for the store. Tell mother that we are fishing for her favor. She wants the greatest possible value for the money she spends. We will make a dollar go so far that she can't afford to trade elsewhere. In April 1914, once again, it's time to play ball. June 1914, they're all taking a little dip. Boys and girls, vacation days are not far off. You will soon be going swimming and having lots of nice times. Better come here today with mother or father and see some of the nice things we have for you to wear this summer. Who would have thought that businesses would be enticing children like this? And here's September 1914. Once again, it's going back to school, and one Tad certainly doesn't like it. And this marks the end of the Tiny Tad's comic strip in 1914, the end of my collection, and the end of this program. So I will return the screen to Hal.
Oh, thank you so much, Dan. That's just terrific, getting another look at those cards and seeing the artist's signature, how it kind of changed, or it was just usually a G for Gustav and then the Verbeck. And, if you just saw that signature, you probably wouldn't be able to identify it at all. I mean, it's difficult reading, but uh, I think we all would recognize it now for sure. But great cards and series, and I counted two that were Canadians, so that was fun to have something that went across the border. And obviously it worked. Advertising pays, they always tell you, and
Yes.
it's great. But uh, Bill Burton's here, and we want him to kind of look at any questions that might have been posted and see if there's any one, and everyone will unmute themselves and we can have an exchange here if we have any questions or comments.
Thanks, Hal. I'd like to ask, these are obviously advertising cards, and as you say, they spanned not only across the Canadian-US border, but they went from East Coast to West Coast. He could not, at least it seems to me, have had just one relationship with a store at a time. Is there any sense at all of how many stores advertised using these cards with any regularity?
Not that I know. This collection has only been for a few years. And as I said, there's very little information about Gustav Verbeck. There's a few books that were published of the comic strips, but nothing on the postcards that I know of. So
it's extraordinary that some of these stores would be one thing. He lived in San Francisco, but the store in Rochester, the store in Manitoba, how would he have gotten hooked into these?
Well, I don't know where he lived. I assumed he lived on the East Coast because that's where most of the action was. And, he could have had some management back there that was handling all of this.
Well, and maybe the company that were his cartoons syndicated, do you know?
Yeah, they were syndicated. They're on different newspapers. But how many newspapers, I don't know.
Okay, so well, perhaps then that they were doing some of that for him, but it's really extraordinary. We do have a number of people who raised comments, and Jerry says, is there any way of knowing how many of these cards were produced for different retailers?
The only way I would know is just keep looking for them and buying them when you find one. Especially postcard publishers kept very poor records. There's no publisher on the card. It's just it's one of those thick stock, cheap cards. You got to remember, this is before World War I. So this is when you could have had great printing being done in Germany, and which was being done. And those cards would then be brought back to the United States. But these cards were just printed here in the United States on that cheap, kind of very brittle paper.
But thick, you said.
Yeah, that thick kind of thick cardboard stock.
Huh. Very interesting. I say. Katie Clark says, love the follow-up with a Portola Day card. That's thorough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Andrew Cunningham, you've written a rather long paragraph. I've never seen these. Thanks. I do have a Buster Brown card from the same era that is just about the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the calendar and distributed by a clothing store. Are you aware of those?
Yeah, I've seen a few of those. Some of those are a little bit larger in size. These are all your basic standard size 3.5 by 5.5, and I've seen some Buster Brown cards that are like 4.5 by 6.5. So it makes it difficult to what to do with.
Unless they're trimmed.
Yeah, but they're on that similar type of cardstock.
So Andrew, what do you think?
Well, I was just reminded, I thought maybe I had one, but then I looked and it's a Buster Brown, but it's almost the same design and everything. I just have the image of it. I'm not sure how large the card physically is though. But anyway, I only have one, so.
There is on eBay, it might still be listed, an uncut sheet of the cards. But I had to take a vow not to buy anything that looks like a poster. Okay. I have no wall space, and I'm not going to buy something, just roll it up and stick it in a tube.
Do you have any recollection whether they were all the same images or were they?
I think they're all different images. Maybe a store could buy these sheets and cut them up and mail them out.
Yeah.
From the same advertiser?
Yeah. No, they're not printed. I don't think they have the ad copy on them yet. That's an interesting topic. You could have, maybe the stores bought the sheets and then had them reprinted with their name and copy.
Local store.
Yeah.
That'd be a way of doing
Yeah.
things. And you could circulate them and sell them all around. That might be a very, very good. We'll have to figure. Somebody's got to find that out. Any takers?
Yeah.
All right.
I'll assign some homework.
Yes, very, very good. Dan Krotz says, very interesting. These cards seem to have made it across the country to many retailers that use them by promotion and advertising. We'll be looking out for them. Dan, maybe you want to take this whole project on? Come on, Dan.
I don't know. I have a lot of advertisement postcards, and I'll have to look through them. They're very interesting.
Is that a yes?
I'll be looking at them. Yeah. Yep.
If I might add, I also collect these cards and the Buster Brown. But while I'm a recent buyer of the Alcott cards, the tiny heads I've been collecting for 20 years, and I don't think I even have half of the number that you have. I've never seen the vertical ones. I am aware of different vendors that were using them, and I'd gladly share that if anyone wanted to put it together. But if anyone has doubles, I'm here and still looking for my tiny tads, but they're just not available very often on the East Coast. So
none of the mega dealers around the country have these things at all, Susan?
Pardon me, Bill?
Like Card Cow, Mary Martin, people like that don't have them?
I could ask Mary. In fact, that's not a bad question for me to charge forward, but I search cards all year long, and I just don't come across very many of them. I mentioned earlier to Daniel that the reason I was interested in them early on was because I was working with Craig Yo, a cartoonist, and this gave us discussion because he knew Verbeck. And I can go back to him and see if he has more information.
Interesting.
I'm a collector. I'm not a researcher, so I do my collecting. I do my research on eBay and postcard shows. But I have, like I said, there's very little information about Gustav Verbeck, who was an artist of, some renown in the early 20th century. He didn't, so he had 20, 30 years as an artist in sculpture. Apparently he was an expressionist. Maybe there's ways to see if we can locate some of his art.
You say he was a sculptor?
That's what I read online. Yes, he did He retired from comics and postcards and became a painter and sculptor. And then he died in 1937.
So when do you think well, you say the last cards that you've seen were 1914.
1914, yeah, and then the comic strip ended around 1914 or 1915. And that was apparently, if you believe what you read on the internet,
Oh, no.
that's when he stopped doing the tiny tads and doing comic strips and postcards.
Huh. Well, this has been extraordinarily interesting, and there's so many gaps here that we gotta get somebody to fill these in.
Susan, do you think Susan Nicholson know anything about these? He's not mentioned in her book.
I'll ask her. Let me write a note for myself.
Okay, well, we've let's see, one more chat come in.
What
Let's see, Paul Hutchinson, Ancestry has a New York City directory listing for Verbeck and a few documents as well. Paul, are you here?
Yes.
How extensive is that listing?
Well, I just took a quick look. There are at least half a dozen directory listings that come up at the top of the list of results for his name. And there's, I think, the 1930 census listing for him and a death registration and a few other things. But I didn't go all the way down the list to see what else might be there. But certainly there is information through Ancestry that could be had.
Interesting.
Can you say that
Ancestry.com.
the Ancestry found this in New York, so you think he may be a resident of New York at the time?
Oh yeah, he was a resident of New York City. Yeah, he's listed. It gives his occupation as artist, and he's the year of birth and death and everything match what was given in the presentation. So there is some information in there.
Uh-huh.
You also might try to find a grave.
True.
The newspaper that ran that you showed that ran the comic strip was pretty obscure. Do you think it was run anywhere else? It must have been syndicated.
Yeah, I assume it was, because he's very well known for the first one, the upside downs of Little Lady Lovekins and Old Man Muffaroo. It only ran for 2 years, but those strips have been reproduced in a couple of books. I really caught people's fancy. There are, I've noticed on eBay, you can find the actual tiny tads, the strips, that have been cut out of the newspaper that people saved. So he's
Based on a cardboard or something?
no, I think it's just paper, just old newsprint. So he had his moment, back there in the early 1900s.
Well, somebody's got to do this. I didn't want to be me, and it's apparently not going to be Dan Kratz either. So, Susan, you're elected.
I'm not running for office.
No,
I will help anyone who wants to do the project, but
Wow.
let's see. I need more cards before I can speak up.
Well, we thank you for coming, and thank you very much, Dan, for doing this. I think you've opened a window for us, and I think all of us will be looking. I often go through an advertising section of a dealer's box or album, and you just never know when something like this might pop up. And like you say, if they're halfway reasonable, we might get them and send them to you in your Christmas card or something.
my birthday is in May.
There you go. There you go. Well, the information, it's great that Susan has some, and maybe that information could be exchanged with you too. And so let's see what happens. But it's a neat deal, and I have a small advertising section I hadn't thought about until just now in my Wichita collection. I don't think any of them fit that, but this sort of way of communicating, you wonder if department stores, they probably had an organization and a magazine and people, and And so just like with the Buster Brown cards, I think that was a good, and before that, the Yellow Kid, larger, all cut designs too. I think some of those had kind of that flavor as well. So something to think about, and hopefully we can add to the story at some point.